Hello everyone, I'm Danielle, and in this video I'll be compiling the ideal Nikon kit for wildlife photographers worth $5,000. I'll be doing one for DSLR and one for mirrorless, as I know we've got strong supporters of both on our channel. As you can see, I'm not in my normal spot on the Chobe River today. I am in fact visiting the city, and I'm here at Outdoor Photo in Pretoria, South Africa, which is your one-stop shop for all the gear and advice you could ever need as a wildlife photographer. Now, I've had a look around the store and I've spoken to some of the guys here on the floor, and I've managed to stick to the $5,000 budget that I was given as a challenge. It hasn't been easy, however, because whenever you're working with a budget, it means that you do have to make some compromises. You can unfortunately not pick the best of everything. So it is a compromise. And let's be honest, I can spend all $5,000 on one single camera body. That's easy. But instead of that, I've put together a all-round kit that I believe will give you fantastic images. I'm using dollars as a reference currency, but do what I did, go online and check out the best deals. Go and look for the best deals. Come into your local camera store, chat to the guys on the floor and see what deals they have on offer. The DSLR kit was much easier than the mirrorless kit, and I'll tell you in a while why that was. But for now, I'm going to start with the DSLR kit. First up on my list is the D500 camera. This is a fantastic 21 megapixel camera. It's an APS-C sensor camera, so it's got a cropped sensor, and it shoots at up to 10 frames per second. I love this camera. The most incredible feature about this camera is actually the buffer. I can hear that someone is shooting with a D500 camera without even having to look. It's honestly like your neighbor's dog. It just never stops going, but in a good way, of course. Next up is the 200 to 500 5.6 lens from Nikon. This is an excellent lens. I love this lens. I actually own this lens myself, and every time I think about letting it go or selling it, I shoot with it again and then I end up keeping it. It is tack sharp. It's a fixed aperture lens, which is always best at 5.6. Remember that on the D500, this 200 to 500 will effectively be a 300 to 750 millimeter effective field of view or effective zoom, whatever you want to call it. Because of the cropped sensor, it's going to look more zoomed into your eye. So effectively, it's going to be a 300 to 750 millimeter zoom. Next up is the 14 to 24 millimeter 2.8 lens. This lens is the second of two in my kit. You cannot go wrong with this lens. It's been around for a while. It has an amazing reputation. It's also a fixed aperture lens, and it is tack sharp. I know what you're thinking. Why so ultra wide? And the rest of you are thinking, why did you leave off the 70 to 200 2.8 lens? How can you leave that off a wildlife kit? Well, my reasoning is as follows. Firstly, budget. As I said before, you cannot have everything, and the 70 to 200 2.8 is very expensive. It is one of the best lenses out there, and it's one of my favorite lenses for wildlife photography, but it is expensive, unfortunately. So because I already have a telephoto zoom in my kit, I decided to go the opposite way, and I decided to opt for the wide angle. Secondly, it's not ultra wide when it's put on the D500 body, because it is once again taking into consideration the crop factor. So effectively, it is going to be let me just double check me on my maths here. It's going to be a 21 to 36 millimeter lens effective field of view. So it's not ultra wide, but it is still wide. Then my third point in my reasoning is that you can shoot stars with it. So, I mean, it doubles up. If you want to do some astrophotography, then you are able to shoot some stars with it. And then my last point in the reasoning is that the 1424 gives you a much more creative effect. So in wildlife, there's a big movement towards being more creative in terms of your composition and the lens that you use. So it's moving towards showing the animal in its environment shot, or getting really close up to the animal and shooting it wide. There is still space for zoomed in tight portraits and that, but creatively it's moving in the direction of going wide. So that's my reasoning for choosing the 14 to 24. If you are still not convinced, then you're welcome to get the 24 to 70 millimeter lens, also a 2.8 fixed aperture lens, also a fantastic tack sharp lens. It's a winner. If you want to use filters, that's obviously a better option because the 14 to 24 can't use filters. It is a little bit cheaper than the 14 to 24, and then your zoom range is a little bit higher. So if you're not convinced by the 14 to 24, 24-70 is great, but I'm sticking to my 14 to 24. Then a CFexpress card. I've chosen CFexpress. You can use your XQD card as well as an alternative. The D500 is now also compatible with a CFexpress card. Just make sure that you are on the latest firmware update. So that's important. Then, as I say, you can use your XQD as well. I just chose the CFexpress card for my kit. It is much faster than the SD card. So it's a great card to have in the camera, and I've chosen this one from Sandisk. The D500 has 2 card slots, and your second one is for an SD card. I would suggest filling your second card slot because you don't want to be in the middle of a series shooting and your CFexpress or your XQD card fills up and the overflow has nowhere to go. So it is really important to have a second card in your second card slot. And so it's not as fast, the SD XC card is not as fast as the CFexpress card, but it is going to be an absolute lifesaver. So I've chosen this SD XC card. Then a card reader, really important. I came across this card reader from ProGrade Digital, and I haven't used it myself, but it is an SD combined with a CFexpress card reader, which is fantastic to have 2 in 1. So that's why I chose this ProGrade Digital card reader. And then lastly, you have to fit your gear in a backpack. I have chosen the Lowepro Flipside 300 backpack. It will fit all the gear that I mentioned above into the bag, and the bag fits into my budget. So that's my choice for a bag, the Lowepro Flipside 300 backpack. Great, so all of that comes to $4,978. I think I did pretty well with my budget of $5,000. Now I have $22 left, so what do I do with the $22? Well, I'd probably spend it on something like this Think Tank memory card holder that holds CFexpress cards and SD cards. Before I go on to the mirrorless kit, please remember to subscribe to our channel if you're enjoying our videos. Remember to click the bell icon to get notifications about when our next videos are available to watch. On to the mirrorless kit. This one was a lot more tricky than the DSLR kit, and I'll tell you why. Nikon is currently expanding their range of mirrorless gear. And currently, as it stands, most of the cameras in the mirrorless range are full frame cameras except for one. Then if you look at the lenses, and I'm working with dedicated mirrorless gear here, I'm not going to be using F-mount lenses with an adapter because it is a complete mirrorless, exclusively mirrorless kit. The longest focal length that you can currently get on a mirrorless lens is 250 millimeters, and it is a 4.5 to 6.3 millimeter lens. That is unfortunately not enough reach if you put it on a full frame body for wildlife photography. So 250 is just a little bit short of what we need for those great telephoto shots. Also, because it is a variable aperture lens, I'm not going to be putting a teleconverter on. It's a zoom lens and it has a variable aperture, and I'm not going to be putting a teleconverter on there. You'll lose too much light in my opinion. Obviously, we're all looking forward to the 200 to 600 millimeter and the 100 to 400 millimeter lenses that are said to be coming out between 2021 and 2022 at some point. And that is going to change this whole game. But for now, I've had to work around it a little bit. And how I've solved this problem is I have chosen the cropped sensor camera, the one cropped sensor camera currently available from Nikon in the mirrorless series. And then I have paired it with at least one really good lens, some fast glass. So that's going to increase my reach and hopefully not lose too much quality. I'll explain the setup, how I chose the kit in a moment. But that's what I did to get around the focal length dilemma. First up in my mirrorless kit is the Z50 mirrorless camera. This is a fantastic 21 megapixel APS-C crop sensor camera. It shoots at up to 11 frames per second. And it actually has a lot in common with the D500, although it is seen as an entry-level mirrorless camera. But this camera absolutely great value for money. Next up is the Z70-200 2.8 lens. So finally the 70-200 makes an appearance. This lens is not cheap, but I prefer to invest in glass before I invest in a camera body, within reason obviously. This lens is an S-line lens, so it has superior image quality. It has a fixed aperture of 2.8 throughout the zoom range, so it is a fast lens. And I have chosen to put it on the APS-C body, the Z50 body, because effectively then I'm getting, let me just double check my maths, 105 to 300. It's the 1.5 times crop factor. You get 105 to 300 millimeters effective zoom on this lens if you mount it on the Z50 body. So we're already winning with reach in that sense. Then I have chosen, optionally, if you want to go further than the 300, optionally you can add a teleconverter. Generally, I'm not a fan of putting a teleconverter on a zoom lens, but this is a fast lens at 2.8, so if you want a little bit more reach without losing too much light and quality, we're working with a budget here, can't afford to buy a prime, so we put a teleconverter on the 70-200, and that will take us to, let me just double check my maths again, to 420 maximum. All right, so it's going to be your maximum focal length 200 times 1.5 with the cropped sensor body, and then times another 1.4 with the teleconverter, which gives you effectively 420 millimeters without losing too many stops. So next up on the list is a 1.4 times teleconverter. Now, as I've mentioned, I'm not a fan of using a teleconverter on a zoom lens generally, but we have a focal length dilemma here, and we're working with good glass. So to get that bit of extra reach, it's really worth considering the 1.4 times teleconverter. I'm not a fan of the 2 times converter. I might consider using that on a prime lens, but definitely not on a zoom lens. Next up on my list is the Z16 to 50 millimeter dedicated mirrorless lens. This is a variable aperture lens of great quality. Same reasoning as before, go wide, get creative. That's why I put it in here. Obviously I would have loved to put the 14 to 24 in here as well, or the 24-70, but we're working with a budget here, and this lens is great quality and great value for money. Effectively, it is going to be on the Z50 body, it is going to be a 24 to 75 millimeter lens, so almost like the 24-70, but it does have a variable aperture, so keep that in mind. But great value for money and a great add to the mirrorless kit. Then SD cards. The Z50 only has one card slot for an SD card, so I would suggest carrying a spare card with you in your bag. You really don't want to be stuck with the card filling up out there in the field and not having anything and having to sit and delete images off your card that's in the camera. So I would suggest getting 2 SD cards, and I've chosen these SDXC cards from Lexar. Next on my list is an extra battery. So mirrorless cameras are unfortunately renowned for not so great battery life at the moment. It should maybe improve over time, but currently I really would suggest having a second battery with you if you're shooting with a mirrorless camera. So that's why I've put the second battery on the list. Really important, and it will probably save you a lot of frustration. As for a card reader, I chose this one for Sony. It fit in the budget, and it's a good quality card reader. And then with the backpack, I stuck to the Lowepro Flipside 300 again, because like before, all the gear will fit in it and the bag will fit in my budget. I've got around $100 left over, and that's why I decided to throw in a tripod. I chose this one from Vanguard, really good quality. It's got a bull head, so great value for money with this Vanguard tripod. The remaining $25 I would probably spend on something like this lens cleaning kit for $24.95. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your support with our videos. We really appreciate it. I hope to see you soon in the next video. Keep well, keep safe. Bye-bye.